Welcome to Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query. And today we are joined by a guest, Sharla. Sharla has a very unique story. She was involved in health and fitness from a very young age, earning a certification in aerobics, competing in aerobics, and then she went on for 20 to 30 years in health and fitness, combination of aerobics training, running, weightlifting, cycling with her husband. And at the very young age of 51, she made a decision that she wanted to compete in bodybuilding after a lifetime of admiring the physiques that are presented on stage. She successfully completed her first competitive season, continued to improve show after show, and then discovered that she had some hernias that needed to be repaired. She had her hernia repair and ended up going through the recovery process, getting approved for leg training, and 7 months post-surgery, she was in the gym doing legs for one of the very first times she had done legs at that point in 7 months, when tragedy struck. Her L1 exploded, pushing into her spinal cord and causing immediate paralyzation from the waist down. She went into emergency surgery surrounded by her family. And on the other side of it, she actually ended up finishing a 90-day fitness competition. It's all she knew. Within 10 short months following, she had stepped back on stage, or in her case now, wheeled back on stage to earn her IFBB Pro card as a wheelchair competitor. Throughout this episode, we discover and talk about health and fitness throughout the years, different seasons of her health and fitness and what that meant as the mom of 5 beautiful children. Hope you enjoy. Welcome to another episode of the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query, and I'm joined by a guest today, Sharla. Welcome.
Thank you. It's an honor to meet you, and I'm excited to learn more about you, and maybe you can answer some of my questions too.
Absolutely. It'd be my pleasure.
Awesome.
So the reason, it's actually a really funny story. Sharla found me through a guest appearance on a podcast, and she just informed me she's listened to my episode twice, happened to follow me, realized that I'm local here in Arizona. And I reached out like I do to a lot of my new followers, just making a connection, asking them, hey, what brings you to my community? Why are you here? Chatted a little bit back and forth, and we just made it an immediate decision of like, hey, let's get you on the podcast. Let's sit down. Let's have a chat. Because for those of you who may be new here, maybe this is your first time listening, the whole purpose of this podcast, Intentional Health for Women, is not only to educate, but also to bring guests that you may be able to relate to, that can provide either education, insight, or stories that maybe make you feel not so alone and that you aren't the only one dealing with what you might be dealing with. So with that being said, we were chatting a little bit back and forth, and tell me, like, you've been active your whole life. Like, what did that look like? When did that start? And what did that look like early on?
My mother was a piano teacher, and she would offer to teach us kids as well as the kids in the neighborhood. She would want us to sit down and play the piano, and that was absolutely something I was not going to do because I loved being outside. And so anytime I could be outside, I was outside, and I would find a tennis racket and I would hit tennis against the side of my house. I would just find something to keep myself active. I really enjoyed running and climbing and being outside. And as I got a little older, I was watching TV and I saw this man named Gil in Hawaii, and he was teaching aerobics on the beach. And I started doing aerobics following his show, and I just fell in love with aerobics. And then I would watch a couple of bodybuilding shows after that with Corey Everson and Keanu Reeves, I think her name is.
Mm-hmm.
And I would watch them work out, and I would see them doing bicep curls and lat pull downs. And it got me really excited about wanting to be in a gym. And so at the age of 16, I found a lady who took me under her wing, and she taught me what I needed to do to become certified to be an aerobics instructor. And so I became an aerobics instructor at age 16.
Okay.
And I taught lots of classes, and then I had free membership to wherever gym I was teaching. So I would stay after, and I would lift weights, and then I'd swim in their pool. And some days I would bike to the gym and bike home. And I just created a really happy time doing that. And so I taught aerobics for my high school years and into college. And then I found out that there was a competition called the Reebok National Aerobic Championships. And so I got really excited about that. And I found out, all the things you had to do. I had to get a sponsor. And I trained as much as I knew how. I didn't have a coach. I didn't really know what I was doing. I just knew I wanted to do it. And I showed up and I competed, and the judges said to me, "Who's your coach?" And I said, "I don't have one." And they were just like, "Where'd this girl come from?" I think I was like the youngest one there. And I didn't know what I was doing, but they're like, "Wow, good, good for you." And after that, I ended up getting busy with college, and then I met my husband, and we got married, and he was in dental school. And during that time, we mentioned that early, right?
I did not. You did not mention that he's
a dentist.
That's okay. Interesting.
Yeah. And he's physically active. We would ride bikes together and hit the trails whenever we could. And then we started having our family, and I continued to go to the gym as much as I could. That was my favorite thing, was lifting weights. And so I would go to the gym. I would take my kids to the gym. And so that was something I continued to do, hoping that someday I would accomplish something really cool, like maybe do a show, or maybe
I want to stop you right there.
Yeah.
Because I think like the verbiage that you chose is, okay, you and your husband stayed active, started to have a family. Mm-hmm. And you said something of like, I kept going to the gym, and I think you said like as much as I could. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a really important statement that I really want to focus on. Is like, there is seasons to life. And right now, and one of my biggest pet peeves as a coach who's, I'm 34 years old. Like, I'm no longer in my 20s. I have more responsibilities, and I am looking as I progress in my life to take on more responsibilities. And one thing that we see on social media is a lot of these young women who are like you. Maybe they came from a similar background. They love being active. They love working out. It's probably not aerobics anymore, but they got working out in some way, shape, or form, and they grow a following on social media quickly, and they make naive statements about, oh, we all have the same 24 hours. What did that look like in early motherhood? Like, realistically, like how many times were you making it to the gym? Yeah.
In the very beginning with my first, I really did not make it to the gym that often. It was the stroller, and it was the running around the neighborhood. So, I have pictures of myself with my first child in a stroller, and we would, run as much as we could around the neighborhood. And I'd have to time it just right, with nap time and, all of that. And so in the beginning, I don't think I hit the gym very often. I was just doing squats and running, on my own, maybe some push-ups and sit-ups. But it was like, I'm a mom now, and this is what I can still do. And so I kind of put the heavy lifting and all of that to the side for a little bit until I was able to get to a really good gym that had a really great daycare. And by that time I had 2 kids, and then it was, the gyms have great daycares. They really do. And the kids loved going because they had fun things to do, and there was other people. And so that was just kind of the life. But it was hard because you would take your kids in and then they would catch some illness that's going around. And then you're out of the gym for a couple of days. And it was like this game that you would play. And it's like, well, I guess we're not going because you're sick today and you've got a runny nose and you're coughing. And so it wasn't something consistent, even though they have the daycare, it's there and your kids like going. It just seemed like they were sick every other week or something. And so it was a little frustrating.
So I think it's super important to hone in on is like something I was taught a long time ago is there's seasons of life. Mm-hmm. And baby kid number 1, kid number 2, it was running, squats at home, push-ups, things that you could do to continue to move your body. And given the foundation that you had built earlier in your life, like that was enough. Maybe did you look exactly how you wanted to? Probably not. But you had built a solid foundation. And for those of you out there that maybe you don't have that foundation, you don't have to run. It can be walking, air squats, and push-ups at home. Anything to do to move your body, like it can be progressed or regressed in any way, shape, or form. But the understanding is there's seasonalities of life, and it does not have to be all or nothing, right? And I think that's like the biggest thing that I pick up from as soon as I start to hear your story is there was never an all or nothing mindset. It was, what can I do? And how can I make this fit the current season of my life? And as you stepped into that next season of like working out in a gym, but there was no consistency. Like you did the best that you could with what you had and what you had available, and you made it happen. And again, it was, you were stepping into that next season where it's like, okay, I'm back in a gym, but it's maybe not as many days as I want it to be. And that's okay too. And so with that being said, like what did like nutrition throughout that time frame? Did you ever work with a coach during that time frame in those years? Was it all kind of like self-taught? Did you have like a good background of like nutrition growing up with your parents and stuff like that?
Nutrition has been a lifetime struggle. And I have grown up as a sugar addict. There we go. As a sugar addict, my sister and I would work in a horse barn on Saturdays. Okay. And we'd have to pack our lunch. Sure. And we would pack peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a pack of chips, a pack of cookies, and a pop.
Pretty standard nutrition around that time frame.
Yeah. And I remember every Saturday we would work, in the stalls and helping out with the horses. And then our lunch break was that. And I remember feeling so sick after that, but it was something we kept eating anyway, just because that's what we ate. Yep. And I remember being on licorice like every day. That was like my daily food was licorice or sometimes ice cream. But it was in high school that I realized that my eating wasn't that great, that I needed to kind of change that. And it became a real struggle because when you try to get off of sugar, it's like a monster that comes right back. Like you're really good for a while and you try to make changes and then it's like a monster. I feel like it's been a lifetime of trial and error and never, ever giving up. And when you have your kids, it's harder. You have this extra stress. Yeah. They don't eat the same foods you do. And it just seems like all of a sudden chocolate is like, it's like the number one thing you crave when you have kids. So I've had a lifetime of trying to get over that sugar addiction.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. How do you feel fitness has impacted you, like as a mom? Like, I'm sure over the years you have friends that maybe don't work out and friends who don't lead an active lifestyle, but married, have kids, otherwise. And so you're probably aware of that. Is how do you feel that your lifestyle, from working out, doing your best that you can with your nutrition, et cetera, like how do you feel that that impacts your life and how you've shown up as not only a wife, but as a mom?
Ever since I was young and saw the bodybuilding, I just knew that muscle was the answer to living a healthy lifestyle. And I know a lot of people like to hike and do yoga, which I think is phenomenal as well. And I've enjoyed that as well. I've done that a lot. But I feel like it's the muscle that keeps you, keeps that, it's like your muscle is your metabolism.
Yep.
And so I felt like that was really important to me. And I've seen, as we've gotten older, my friends have gotten older, I've seen the difference between those who lift weights and eat healthy and those that don't lift weights. And even though they're doing healthy things, and I think it's mentally, it's healthy to do yoga and hiking, those are, those are up there too. I have to say they
100%.
definitely are. But I also feel like you've got to have that rounded out with the weight training. You've got to keep that muscle, and you've got to keep your legs strong for hiking so that you don't break down. And then the yoga, of course, is wonderful with strength training, because I feel like it gives you that stretching and that extra release that your muscles need. So I think there's like a combination of all of that that's really, really helpful.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've had a coach and a mentor, like officially, like on paper, we've worked together for 3 years, but like he's been around and a part of my life really since I started in the health and fitness space. And we did one-to-one mentorship for 2 years, and we had a conversation a long time ago. And it's funny is like we spoke about is it's not necessarily good for our pocketbooks, but realistically, like when we look at females and understanding women's hormones and physiology at the level that I do, and I still have plenty to learn. If I could give like an ideal for most women, it would be to strength train 2 days a week, maximum of 3, do something along the lines of like Pilates, right? Like low impact, something where you're still challenging your muscles, but it's not as much as like strength training. And then maybe like 1 to 2 days of yoga thrown in there, and then like a couple of hikes. Like that would, if I could draw out the perfect week for a well-rounded, healthy woman who's not necessarily chasing a specific like goal of competing on a stage or powerlifting or otherwise, like that would just be the secret sauce to a really healthy woman that's going to age really, really well.
Yeah, I agree. I see people who do treadmill after treadmill after treadmill after treadmill every day. And I like, you just need that well-roundedness of exactly what you're saying. So
yeah. Cause like, I think, your point of like muscle, like by no means am I old, but at 34, like I'm getting to an age where like you said, like I'm starting to really look at my peers and like, I see peers, I see people who are maybe 3-4 years older than me. I see people that I went to high school with, and I'm like, you look 5 to 10 years older than me. Or I see people who are 3-4 years older than me, and I'm like, you look like you're 40, like, or mid 40s. Like you look way older than I do. And I'm sitting here and I'm like looking at the pictures of me 5 years ago when I moved here, and I was like really baby faced, and I'm like, I've aged, but it's like almost like as if I've aged in reverse. And I'm just like, man, like, all right, sweet. Like I'm aging well.
Yay. That's so awesome. I love that. I mean, I've kind of felt the same way. It's, when I see the Christmas cards coming in every year, the family pictures, and I look at, and I just go, I'm not going to be the fat mom. I'm not going to be the fat mom. And so for me, I'm like, it's really important for me to stay healthy and stay fit. And it's just kind of the same thing. It's like, we're the same age. And I feel like I look healthier or younger or something. So
what's been one of the biggest things that you feel like has allowed you to keep those things in check? Because one surprising fact about you that you told me is like, hey, you've had 5 kids. Like it's not 2 or 3, like 5. That is a lot of little humans running around to raise, to manage schedules, etc. What has been one of the biggest like driving forces outside of like your solid foundation of just wanting to be an active person to not let that slip, not let your fitness slip, not, let your nutrition completely go off the rails?
I wanted to not be my mom, who was overweight, had hypertension, diabetes, all of those things. I think that was a big driver for me, is that I did not want that for myself. I wanted to be healthy. And that was something that really appealed to me. And so I knew I had to get my nutrition right, because I could work out, I could go running, I could do all these active things, but I knew that if I couldn't get my nutrition right, that I was never going to make that complete. And so I worked very hard. There were many days I would cry because I could not get myself off of sugar or a sugar binge or something. And I would try really hard. I might make it, a few days or whatever. And it wasn't until I came to Bright Line Eating that helped me overcome my sugar addiction. And it wasn't perfect, but it really helped me overcome that addiction of understanding the brain and the addiction. And when you completely take out flour and sugar from your diet, you no longer crave it.
Yeah.
And so you had to be very specific on every little condiment, any protein shake, anything you had that had a little bit of stevia, sugar, anything that would trigger the brain. So I went through that, which really, really got me on the right path as far as my nutrition. I've come a long way from that, and I've kind of modified into my own thing. But I feel like nutrition was the biggest part. And once I had that, I felt like, and my kids were older at that time.
Yeah.
I felt like I can do whatever. Like I can do whatever I want. Like as far as like hitting my goals, my health and fitness goals. I felt like once I had nailed that I could, like, when I turned 51, it was like, okay, this is the year I'm going to start competing in bikinis. So this is, what I want to do. So
when did you find the nutrition program that you're talking about?
Let me think when that was. It's called Bright Line Eating. And it was, I wish I could remember the year. Maybe 2015.
Sure.
So maybe almost 10 years.
Yeah. And then fast forward, like you said, 51, you decided to start competing in bodybuilding. And can kind of piece it together, right? Like you've been watching bodybuilding for a long time.
Yeah. I've been wanting this for a long time.
Yeah.
So.
Was that really it? Like, was it just simply like, hey, this is the right season? Like, hey, the kids are grown. They don't need as much. Like, I can manage these tasks. Like, was that kind of why that fell where it fell?
Yeah. Part of it was that I met somebody who was competing, and I watched her, and she gave me the courage to do it.
Yeah.
And so it just seemed like the timing was right. My kids were older. I was hitting the gym harder at that point, so I was getting more ready. I did have a setback with a pulled shoulder. So I was just working one side, and I was going through PRP injections.
Yep.
And they totally cured me.
Yeah.
I mean, I was 80% torn rotator cuff. Nice. And I never had to go through surgery. I have no pain. I'm working out. I will tell you, PRP is amazing. So as soon as that was over, I met her, and I was watching her because it's something I'd always wanted to do. And so I watched her do it, and she won the whole show. It was a natural show. And she's like, you could have gotten up there and done it. I'm like, really? So I got really excited, and I hired a coach, and I said, I want to do this. This is my time, This is my season. This is my time. And so I just went all in.
Awesome. Yeah. And so how long ago was that?
That was in 2020. Yeah.
2020.
Wait. Right? I'm trying to think. 2022. There you go.
Okay.
Yeah. 2022. Yeah.
And you competed once, and then did you immediately roll over and do a show within a short window? Did you take a full off season?
I did 5 shows that year. So we did a 15-week prep.
Yep.
And my first show was in Tucson.
Okay.
And I wasn't planning on doing another one until October. So I had 16 weeks to prepare for that one. But then there was one that I didn't know about that was popping up in Scottsdale in August. And I thought, I'm already ready. I might as well keep going.
Yeah.
So I ended up doing that one. And then three more throughout the year. So I did 5 in 2022.
Okay.
So
how did that go? Like how did that season go for you? Did you place well? Did any ramifications for being in prep for that long?
My third show, my first show, I did, I think 4 classes.
Okay.
And I think I got 5th in one class and 2nd and 3rd and just, kind of a combination of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I learned a lot. But I kept going and my body kept making changes. And so from my first show to my last show, I made a lot of changes.
Mm-hmm.
My second show, I ended up getting 2nd. So that was like a big, big improvement. Yeah.
Yep.
And then my third show, I got 1st.
Okay.
And then my 4th show, I got 2nd. And then I went to nationals in Anaheim. It's Masters USA. And I got 2nd there. And so I felt like I made some really good improvements. I had some issues like with my hamstring. I had a pulled hamstring.
Okay.
And so I wasn't able to go heavy, but I had a physical therapist that really helped me do exercises that kept the load off, but I continued to make progress with my shape.
Yeah.
So I was able to work through that and my glutes still made progress. Like you see the pictures. And so you can still do it. If you can't go heavy, it's okay.
Yeah.
So, you can still do it. But my body was pretty worn out by between that 4th and 5th one. Cause they were close
essentially
together.
at that point you had to have been, if my math is mathing, like probably prep for a year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I started in April and then ended in November. So it wasn't quite a year, but it was about 8 months. And I was feeling it before the last show. I was dragging.
Mm-hmm.
I did not feel myself. I just, you have those feelings of like, I don't know how I'm making it through this day. So I was definitely ready to take time off. So.
Mm-hmm. Now, something that kind of comes to mind and given my background is during that time and given your age, like were you on HRT? Is that ever anything that you've like had labs, gone through that process of going on HRT?
Great question.
Yeah.
So I competed in my 51st year. I was 51. Mm-hmm. And so before that, I had been working with a nutritionist and we would do a blood test every 6 months to a year, just kind of depending on where I was in life. And so we were watching my hormones and it was my cortisol that she was worried about because I was the one that would pop up at 5 a.m., go to the gym without eating, work out, and then just go all day long. And she's like, your cortisol is so high, but I'm like, I don't want to eat in the morning. I want to work out. I want to just pop out of bed and get everything done. But I've learned since then to eat first before working out to build muscle. And anyway, I don't know where I was going. I just had a trail there.
So nutritionist labs every 6 months.
Okay, yeah. So my labs.
Cortisol.
So yeah, I had heart palpitations that would come and go, and I through my nutrition and getting off of sugar and chocolate and caffeine, anything really, really helped. Drinking lots of water. Yeah. And so I was able to keep that under control. But lately I was having them in the middle of the night. It was almost like a panic attack, but I would just wake up with this heart fluttering and it just was off. And I would just feel like I couldn't get out of bed. I couldn't move. And it would just be an episode. I call it a heart episode. Yeah. And then it would wear off.
Were you sweating at the same time?
I don't remember if I was sweating. I just know that I don't think so. Cause I remember having a blanket on me.
Yeah.
But I would have those episodes and then they would subside after a couple hours in the morning. Yeah. But there were a couple of days that I couldn't go to the gym because I was having these episodes. So, I sought out what's going on with my hormones and found that they were starting to drop.
Yep.
And so we went on progesterone right away.
Yep.
We had progesterone, pregnenolone, and DHEA.
Okay.
And so I was on the lowest dose of that starting in August, which was my third show.
Okay.
So I look back and I think, were my hormones dropping because of my age? Because I was hitting, period every 3 months?
Mm-hmm.
Or was it the competing that I was doing? And it's so hard to know, because that's the time that I'm hitting menopause or perimenopause, but it's also the time that I was competing. And so it's hard to say what it was caused from.
Realistically, it's both. It's like it's most likely both, right? It's age plays a factor, but then like women are so sensitive to stress. So I don't know if you're aware of this, but unfortunately, due to the nature of our society and culture today, is we are witnessing women go into perimenopause at as early as 27.
That's young.
Due to stress, due so many factors. And so when we look at, your specific situation, watching your hormones and we're seeing them drop, something that I've always said is nothing about competition, whether it's bodybuilding, powerlifting, marathon running, nothing about true competition is healthy. Like you can be as healthy as you can be for as long as you can be, but then there comes a point of no return, meaning it's time to get unhealthy. It's time to push the body to the limits, to be competitive. And in your situation, right, like that's probably when we started to see the combination of just simply your age, along with the stress of competition, starting to bring down everything as far as like hormones and seeing them lower.
Yeah. Yes. So that was the beginning.
How did that impact like the rest of your season? Like, do you feel like that definitely made a big change? Like, did you notice the differences pretty quickly?
So immediately when I started progesterone, my heart issues went away.
Yep.
Nothing.
Yeah.
So I felt really good about that. And I, continued because I really wanted to finish out the year. So even though I was struggling that last week or two, I just knew that as soon as I'm done, I'm going to back, it's time to back off. My body was definitely telling me it was time to back off. And I knew I had a couple of hernias that I needed to have repaired. And so I was going to take a season off and get my hernias repaired.
So then we have hernia repair.
Yep.
When?
So in December. So my last show was November. And then in December, I had my hernia repair. We had 4 hernias.
Okay.
My diastasis recti.
Yeah.
And a tummy tuck.
Yeah.
All in one.
Nice.
And so I had a pretty strict recovery.
Right.
No moving, no doing anything for 8 weeks.
Yeah.
And then only a month of walking around the neighborhood. I couldn't even, go back to the gym or anything.
Which I'm sure, given your personality, was real easy for you.
Yeah. And my doctor said before, he says, I'm going to be extreme because I know your type and I know you're going to push yourself, but no core work for a year. And he said, but for the first 3 months, nothing. Well, what does that do to your muscles and to your bones and everything else when you're in menopause? It's like doing nothing is almost as bad as smoking, So it was kind of a hard time in my life to do that.
Yeah.
To do nothing.
And I think this is something that's I'm going to say is like controversial is I respect Western medicine for what it is. I respect your doctor for his ability to go in and cut you open and fix the things, right?
Yeah.
Kudos. Respectfully, he should not be providing exercise advice. Because on one hand, I agree with him, your personality type and everything along those lines and what have you. But he also did not study exercise physiology, doesn't work day to day with humans who lift. And you as a person, as the person sitting in front of me, is far more resilient than the doctor realizes, and doing nothing time and time again has been proven. I remember when I studied for my first cert, like the original recommendation when arthritis was discovered was sit and rest. Well, that was quickly discovered that was a terrible idea because it actually compounds arthritis and makes it worse like 10x faster than if you just get moving and don't stop.
Yeah.
And that's where like looking into a, person who has a good background in understanding programming and okay, like, all right, these are your limitations. What can we do? How do we maintain strength? How do we continue to be strong, but heal and be protective and smart.
Yeah.
Along the way. So, all right, hernia, you take doctor's orders to heart, you do the right things, right?
Yeah, right.
When are you back in the gym? What's happening?
Yeah. So 3 months later, about March, I'm back at the gym and I'm doing a little bit of walking on the Stairmaster and starting to do my arms. So working my arms, my upper body, until he says I can start doing my lower body. And then in April, was it April? June when it started? I guess it was June. So yeah, March, April, May, I was just working upper body. And then I found out about a 90-day challenge that I wanted to do because I need a little bit of motivation, and
because at this point you've been off, like you're out of routine. It's something to give you a little extra intrinsic motivation and incentive.
Yeah. So I didn't really have another date of a show or anything, a competition or anything. So I wanted this challenge because I wanted to keep myself motivated. So I took on the challenge. I think we started June 1st. Okay. And, I still had my ab restrictions, but I was allowed slowly to start doing some bridges and hip thrusts and things like that. And so I continued to slowly build my legs. And then we're going to go into a big story. You ready for this?
Yep, we ready.
So I got the okay to do deadlifts and squats. And so I was on day 43 of my competition, and I was up in Utah for my daughter to do her volleyball camp. She was 11 at the time. So we went up there for her volleyball camp, and I have another daughter who's 19 at the time, and she lives up there, and we went to the gym. Brand new gym I'd never been to. And we did 20 minutes of glute work to warming up. And then I was going to do squats that day. And I usually do squats on the Smith machine. That's what I've done in the past.
Yep.
And so I just went back to, this is my first time back on the Smith machine, and started out a little bit light. And as we went with our sets and reps, I added a few more plates. Yep. And I was on my 4th set and about my 6th rep. And I went down, and as I'm coming up, I felt a big burst in my back. And it was my L1 vertebrae that burst in half. I had a burst fracture, and half of the vertebrae went right into my spine. Yep. And I immediately went paralyzed from the waist down. Yep. And so I'm holding onto the bar and my legs are collapsing underneath me because I have my legs have gone out. I'm paralyzed. Yeah. And so my neck is getting squished as I'm going down, and I didn't know what to do because, we have a Smith machine, you can just click that right there, right? Yeah. It's so easy, but I was panicking. I didn't know what to do. And so I yelled, help. And as I yelled help, I pushed myself off the bar. And I don't know what happened to the bar. I have no idea because it was on the machine. But I pushed myself off and landed on the floor. And at that time, my daughter turned around because she wasn't paying attention. Maybe she was on her phone. I'm not really sure what she was doing. But she turned around and she sees me on the ground. And the lady that had checked us in at the gym was right next to me, either lifting weights or putting the weights away. I'm not sure what she was doing, but she was right next to me. And I looked at her and I said, call 911. I broke my back. And at the time I didn't have any pain, but I was hyperventilating because I didn't, like something major just happened to my body. And I just felt this big whoosh of warmth go down my legs. And so I was sitting there, just like, call 911. And then I looked around at my body and it wouldn't move. I couldn't move my toes or my knees or anything. And I started like touching my body and I couldn't feel anything. It just felt like a bag of water. It was just all squishy. And I sat there thinking, okay, hurry up. get me to the hospital and fix this so I can get back to the gym. Like whatever's going on, let's get this fixed pronto. And the lady came over and was kind of helping me calm down and wanted me to lay down. I'm like, no, I don't want to lay down. I want to be able to breathe. And soon the paramedics showed up and they stuck IVs in me and got medication going in really fast and got me to lay down and calm down and got me on the stretcher. And I got into the ambulance, and that's when the pain hit. I didn't have the pain until then. And so my daughter's following us in her car, and I am screaming in pain and agony that I've never, ever felt before in my life. And so we get to the hospital in the emergency, and my daughter comes in and she sees me screaming now. She sees that I'm in pain. And so she's over in the corner crying. And I was immediately like looking around at the people working on me. And I said, don't let my daughter see me scream, and I just felt so bad. And so then they whisk me into the x-rays. They find out that I have a spinal cord injury, that the vertebra had burst. And they told me that I was going to have emergency surgery and that they were going to get that piece off the spine as quick as they could. And so my daughter was, at the gym, she was on the phone with my husband telling him what was going on. And he immediately cancels all of his patients and gets a flight.
Yep.
And so I have a 3-hour surgery. And when I come out of surgery, my husband is there and I have movement in my quads.
Okay.
And I have sensation and movement in my quads, but I couldn't move my ankles, can't move my toes, don't have any hamstring strength. I had some sensation all the way down to my toes, but just kind of a nummy feeling just from the back of my hip all the way down on the back side. So that was a good sign that I was having some recovery there. So they call that an incomplete spinal cord injury.
Okay.
So if it's complete, then you have
Nothing.
opportunity for things to return. There's nothing below the site of the injury, but with an incomplete, if you're getting something back, that means you have the opportunity to possibly get everything back. Just every spinal cord injury is different, and everyone's situation is different. So the surgeon was very happy and pleased that I had movement back, and he told me, "Your bones are soft. You need to get that checked out." And it was like, oh. Because they were asking how much weight. It really wasn't that much weight. With the bar plus the weight, it was maybe 95 pounds. Yeah. And they just couldn't figure out why my back would burst like that. So, and there's a couple of speculations that I have, the whole situation, but
of course.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now what? So you had some, I'm guessing you've been through some physical therapy.
Yeah.
And is there any hope of it ever coming back, or is it kind of just that's pretty much all you got? You can still feel your quads and things, and
yeah, I would say my sensation really hasn't changed that much.
It hasn't changed, just kind of same.
My mobility is coming. My mobility has improved. My ankles, I have one ankle that moves more than the other, but that doesn't mean they're strong.
Right. Yeah,
so I have movement, but I don't have strength. And like with my hamstrings, I have movement, but I don't have strength. And so when I'm trying to walk in therapy, I'll have a hyperextension of my knee because I don't have that hamstring muscles on the backside. Yep. And so it's a process of building the muscles that are capable of being built at this point. I still have some that are paralyzed and some that are kind of awake and they just have no strength. So it's all, everyone is so different. And the general, statement is you're going to get what you get a year or 18 months out. But what I have found, and what other therapists that I'm working with have found, is that is not true.
Not true. Yep.
And I see people coming in because of the people I follow.
That's another thing that I get it, but it drives me insane about like Western medicine. Yeah. Context matters, and like trying not to get someone's hopes up, especially in a situation like yours. Like there's a part of me that understands where they're coming from, but at the same time, the opposite effect can be had as well, is like that can be for someone who doesn't have the right mindset, it can be debilitating.
Mhm.
Basically like, hey, year, 18 months, this is all you get.
Yeah.
Anything after that, not a chance. And it's like,
Yeah.
people prove that wrong all the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so I hate
true.
those blanket statements, because like what you're saying is like, okay, between the physical therapists that you're working with that are
Mhm.
specialized in these types of injuries, people that are coming in that you're seeing that maybe are ahead of you on their journey,
Mhm.
and they're noticing changes.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's slow.
Mhm.
I've seen a lot of Instagram feeds that come in across my feed that you'll see someone who started out worse than my case.
Yeah.
You know, big car accident, broken bones, all kinds of things. They're walking with one of those locomotive, I forget what they're called. Like, I've never had to do that. I
Mhm.
had my quads from the beginning, but and then after 4 years, they're out of the chair, and they're walking
Wow.
without any assistance, or, so I've seen those stories. So it amazes me. I've seen so many of them that I know that 18 months isn't the end,
No.
that I can still continue to make progress.
Mhm.
And so it's hard, because I feel like I'm hitting a plateau. Like, I'm not walking,
Yeah.
I'm walking in therapy with them holding me and using
Mhm.
assistive devices, but I don't have the balance to do it myself yet. And but I see other people after years making baby steps to get to that final stage. So, I'm not giving up, hope that
No.
eventually it can happen for me. But if it doesn't, I'm totally okay with that too.
Yeah.
So
then, okay, injury, recovery, you compete again.
I compete again. I know, it's crazy.
Surgery to competition.
Yeah.
How long?
So, so my injury happened in July of 23, and my first competition was February 29th of 24. So, like 7 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So,
How much of like your background between training, nutrition has played a role in like your mental headspace around like your injury, your ability to 7 months go in and compete? And I'm guessing you had to I'm guessing February you qualified, and then when did you win your pro card?
in June. So, yeah, that's a story on the qualification. So I was still doing the 90-day challenge when this happened.
Mm-hmm.
And it was about 4 days in the hospital that I realized, hey, I can still do this challenge. I can still drink a gallon of water. I can still read 10 pages a day. I can still follow my macros and eat healthy.
Mm-hmm.
I can still lift my arms up and down, even though I can't use weight. I can still do 45 minutes of gym time. And I can still go outside and get my outdoor activity, pushing myself in a wheelchair. And so I just focused.
Whose 90-day challenge was this?
It's called Glam Girl. It was called the Glam and Grit Challenge.
Okay.
And it was Glam Girl Bikini. It's a bikini coaching company.
Okay.
And so anyway, I did the best I could. It wasn't as perfect as my first 43 days of like getting to the gym every day and doing everything perfect. But it was definitely kept me going. And I just, had the goal to keep going. And so, I mean, those were still things I could do. So why not? You know? So I continued to do that. And the 90-day challenge was over at the end of August. And then I had a month where I just didn't really have a goal or anything. I didn't work out. I wasn't really tracking my food. I was just kind of eating whatever and just kind of losing a little bit of hope,
Yeah.
Like, this is going to be a long time in a chair. This is not coming very quickly. And then I found out about wheelchair bodybuilding. And I just got so excited that I could do something and I could get back into the game and keep going.
Okay. Amazing.
So we had 2 competitions, and the first one was the Arnold.
Yeah.
And I had another competitor to compete against. And I got first place. And then Wheelchair Nationals came up in June. And I tried to recruit as many wheelchair women as I could. Because you're supposed to have, 5 people to earn a pro card.
Okay.
And so when I went, nobody else showed up. It was just me. And so I was not expecting a pro card at all.
Yeah.
I was just expecting that I'm going to just keep showing up to shows until at some point
there's 5.
Or at some point there's 5, or at some point they'll award me a pro card just because I showed up so many times, And so, and that's what's happened with the past pro. She has her pro card and she didn't have anyone to compete against, but she kept showing up. Mm-hmm. And so they got approval to give her a pro card.
Okay.
And so we're slowly building the pro numbers.
Division,
the pro division. So we can hopefully have, that going. But they, because I had won the first show and I had continued to make progress, and I showed up at the second one making as much progress as I could, that they thought I deserved a pro card. So
amazing.
They awarded me the pro card.
Okay.
So
really now exciting. What does that look like because you're 5 weeks out from the
Olympia?
Yeah.
Yeah. We're actually 3 weeks now.
3 weeks.
Yeah. And so because there's no division in IFBB wheelchair women, we get to guest pose at the Olympia and the Arnold. And so I was invited to guest pose at the Olympia.
Okay. So there's not a bunch of competitors.
No.
Oh, okay.
No.
Very cool.
So I train as if there is, want to look my best and, try to
100%.
put on more muscle. But yeah, it'll just be guest posing. So we're hoping that by next June for the Dallas Pro, there will be enough pros to do a competition, but
amazing.
We have to wait and see.
That's super cool.
So, yeah.
Yeah. My coach is going to compete at the Amateur O.
Oh, awesome.
Coming up here pretty quick.
Awesome. That's exciting.
Yeah.
To cheer him on. Are you going to go?
I am not. No, I'm actually very relieved. I think this is the first time in about 4 years that I do not have any East Coast travel. In the fall, and I'm excited for it. Like I love traveling, but it can get to be a lot, and I'm kind of just excited. Like I'm planning to go to Mexico between Christmas and New Year's, because that's kind of like coach's dead zone of time. Like nobody wants or needs anything that week.
Yeah. Nice.
So I'm excited for that. And I'm, have a conference coming up in November, but thankfully it's actually local. I don't have to travel for it at all, in regards to that. So, I'm curious. I have a closing question, but you said you have some questions. What do you shoot? Like,
okay.
I think this can potentially bring a lot of value to the audience. What do you got for me?
Okay. I want to know about lower body training, because you're a pro at that.
Okay.
Right. What are your thoughts on squats, Smith machine, versus free bar?
In regards to
squats and safety.
There's a lot of, there's so much like context to unpack. In regards to that question, I think given the context of you specifically, right? The doctor said, which is really, really surprising, that you didn't have good bone density, given how active you were for how many years you were active for.
Right.
So then we really have to backtrack of like, okay, like what does your nutrition over your lifetime look like? Were you, myself and Sam, my mentor, on this last episode, we talked about relative energy deficiency syndrome. And it was originally discovered in the gymnastics team. Basically not providing our bodies with enough fuel to support the level of activity and what can start to happen in a female body. And everybody's physiology responds differently to, inputs and outputs. And it could be the loss of your menstrual cycle. It could be inability to handle and manage stress well. It could be over a long time horizon, loss of bone density in spite of weight training and in putting stress on your body, which typically, you know, we would see very, very strong bone density. Your body's ability to absorb nutrients. We have to identify and look like, okay, what does your gut health look like? Like, has your gut health been good throughout your life? Or maybe do we have nutrient deficiencies because we're not absorbing everything that we're consuming? So like, I know this leads to probably far more questions than it does an answer. That's first and foremost. I think provided that you have the mobility, right? The appropriate amount of ability to move through time and space for a squat versus a Smith machine squat. I don't think really, honestly, one or the other is truly safer than the other. Because without any context, without being there that day and watching, when I think about the movement, I don't think that the Smith versus a free weight squat would have been any more or less safe. The Smith machine arguably probably kept you from getting an additional injury, which is great.
Yeah.
But I don't think that one or the other, because what I imagine happening was a couple different things. Number one is you lacked the core stability to manage full range of motion, which is what you were used to doing. And you were doing again. Lack of core stability, lack of mobility in your hips to reach full range of motion. And so what in turn I imagine happened is you were going through full range of motion. Your hips lacked the mobility to do so. And so your body found it elsewhere, and where it found it elsewhere was your back. And your back, given the context of having less bone density, the pressure when it found the mobility somewhere else that it didn't belong is what caused what happened that day. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so this is where, like, I really, really love for a lot of people when they're first getting back into the gym is I talk to people all the time about this is, you know, regressions and progressions, and understanding that we can regress to progress. So one of my favorite movements to program for someone is a front foot elevated split squat. And it is performed a lot different than what most gym goers know as a split squat. Most gym goers know a Bulgarian split squat, right? Well, a traditional split squat performed appropriately is you want to think like, number one is your feet are like on rail tracks, right? So they're shoulder width apart, and that back leg is going to be dragging and it as straight as possible. And you're going to be up on your toe, triple extension. And that back leg is as straight as possible.
Wow.
And then you're going to move forward and down like an escalator, not an elevator, right? So you're not going up and down, you're going forward and down, driving that knee as far forward and past your toes as you possibly can while keeping your heel down. And then when we look at the bottom position of a split squat, or in this case, a front foot elevated split squat, because most people, like I said, in your case, probably don't have the hip mobility to do a proper split squat from the ground. And they probably don't have the appropriate ankle mobility to do that. So we elevate that front foot until they can titrate it down to the floor. But when we look at the bottom position where the knee is all the way over the toe, hamstring is essentially eating that calf, we are looking at the bottom position of a squat, a really good squat, but it's on a single leg.
Yeah.
And so that's where like really good programming and like working with an intelligent coach and understanding like movement assessments of like, where are you? Like, how well can you move through time and space? And understanding like regressions and progressions of like, okay, like how do I get this person to go do these things? And that's where I fell in love with when I was taught about split squats and front foot elevated split squats is, you know, if I give you a goblet squat and like we just can't seem to get depth because your hips aren't allowing it, and this specific person isn't willing to force the mobility, what can I do? All right, well, they can't seem to goblet squat. Can they front foot elevated split squat? And a lot of times they can. And then we build, right? Like we slowly titrate down until they hit the floor. And if they can do a really good split squat, I guarantee they can now do a really good back squat. And the cool thing about doing a split squat that way is not only are you building a lot of dorsiflexion and ankle mobility because you're creating strength at end ranges of motion, you're also on that other end, on that other leg, that drag leg, you're creating a lot of hip extension and strength in true hip extension, and therefore a lot of mobility there as well. And so you're just overall building this person, building hips, building mobility while getting stronger at a squat pattern movement. It's just simply a single leg squat pattern movement.
I think that's amazing that there's so much that goes into it with the proper mechanics, and everybody's body is a little bit different. And I don't want my story to scare anybody from the gym or working out or anything.
Yeah.
But I also, and I feel like I get good value from a coach or somebody who really knows, who's watching my body. Because I have a coach right now.
Yeah.
She sees every move I do, and she'll make a little manipulation of my hand here or there. And it's like, oh, all of a sudden it doesn't hurt or something. Like she watches how my body moves. And I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
But what do you tell somebody who doesn't want to spend money on a coach, but wants to work out, but they want to do it safely?
We live in the information age. There is a lot of self-guided programs led by some of the best professionals out there. First one comes to mind is like RP Strength by Dr. Mike Israetel and the crew that he's putting together and the program that they're putting out. Like, I've never used the software, but he is an industry leading expert. And I feel like there's probably a lot of value, a lot of videos in there explaining, demonstrating technique and form. I think the other thing is like, we've talked a lot about this of seasonalities of life, is maybe you do need to realize of like, hey, I need to take 90 days or 6 months and I need to invest in a coach for the betterment of my health long-term. Because a truly good coach, my goal as a coach is never to keep you forever.
Right.
We spoke about this before the show. We talked about, I have a lot of clients that have been with me for years who are very autonomous. Like realistically, they don't need me anymore. But I always invest in my education. I'm always improving, and I'm there to bounce ideas off of. I'm there to guide the ship, and I'm there to hold them accountable. And so therefore they stay with me for years and years and years. But one of the biggest things that I do pride myself in is the ability to create autonomy in my clients and to start to see the gaps in their knowledge or things that they need to work on, et cetera, as they continue to improve and go along on their journey. And that's the biggest thing that I would say to anybody on the fence about using a coach is you have to understand it is an investment. It is not an expense. And the best coaches have coaches. Like I've had a coach for 3 years and I will most likely have a coach in some way, shape or form for the rest of my life. In spite of being like, not to sound egotistical, but being a pretty decent coach myself. Like I can coach myself, but it's far better, far easier to be able to work with someone, have a second set of eyes on me and know that I'm making the right steps in the right direction.
Yeah, well said. So I have a question about the, what do you call it? The belt.
Yes.
That you put on. What do you call it? Like a weight belt?
Yep.
A weight
belt, weightlifting belt.
Weightlifting belt. Okay. When would you want to use that? And do you recommend using it?
Great question. When do you want to use a weight belt? First, I think we need to discuss what is the purpose of a weight belt. weight belt is not to protect your back, and it is majority of the time not going to protect your back. Mm-hmm. A weight belt, the best way I can think of this to talk about is like, I think powerlifting. I do have some background in powerlifting. And like, for those of you out there that are powerlifters, you're going to understand this. Like, if you're doing any sort of weights that are like 85% of your 1 rep maximum or lower, you should not be using a weight belt. Like, you should not need a weight belt, because the whole idea behind a belt is you're able to take a deep breath into your diaphragm and push your diaphragm against a immobile piece to create more pressure, more stability, allowing you to move more weight. It doesn't guarantee safety. It doesn't guarantee that your back is not going to bend. And that's a whole nother topic, is like the bending of your back, even your lumbar, to a degree, is not bad. And that's like a big thing, is like, there's so many people who like think that like the human body is so fragile and you have to like, no, not necessarily. Because like, I've witnessed people who have had a similar injury, maybe not, paralyzing, going to a hospital, but slip a disc, have a herniated disc, reaching over and picking up a pillow in the wrong position. Yeah. And it's like, okay, well, how did that happen? There's a lot to unpack there. But keeping it to the question is like, the belt is there to create a external source that you can put pressure against so you can lift more weight. It is not there to protect your back. I mean, is there maybe some degrees of like, it might help a little bit, but it's not a guarantee. Plenty of people have injured backs, slip discs, herniated discs, etc., in a weight belt.
Okay.
Interesting. I think that if we're talking, so if powerlifting, basically anything 85% and below, you should not be using a weight belt, and you should be using your internal pressure, your internal diaphragm to build core stability, core strength, and the ability to manage those weights. 85% and above, up to your 1 rep max, like absolutely, like you're trying to lift as much weight as possible. That is the goal of your sport. When we're talking about bodybuilding, like in hypertrophy training, weight belts should be reserved for your top working sets. So if you have 4 sets and you know that you're going to be doing 2 like top sets, like your second to last and last set, like that's your working set, that should be where you might use a belt, because you're going to be able to use more weight to make more progress faster. But outside of that, you should be, again, very similar to the powerlifter, we should be using inner abdominal pressure, creating strength, knowing and understanding proper breathing techniques and stuff like that.
Okay.
Cool.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate that. Those are some things that I always wondered, like, when do you wear that? Maybe I should have had one, or what, so interesting.
This is a ongoing question that was actually inspired by Sam, my mentor, and given the name of the show. What are you doing in this season of your life to live intentionally?
I'm doing everything I am capable of doing right now in a wheelchair. I feel like if there's adaptive rowing, I'm out there rowing. If there's adaptive hiking, I'm hiking. Whatever I am capable of doing, I want to do. Yeah. And so I feel like that's intentional. And right now, my intentional is getting to Olympia and looking my best. Yeah. And performing my best, and just continue with this opportunity I've been given to do wheelchair bodybuilding, and just be all in right now, because this is where I'm at right now. Yeah. And so I feel like when you have that, when I have those goals, then my sleep is intentional, my time priorities are intentional, and what I eat is intentional.
Yeah.
And so I think with those big goals, everything else lines up for me.
Yeah. I think the really important part to close this episode, and something that I pulled away from her statement right away, is doing what I can with intent. Because whether you are coming off of an injury and being in a wheelchair, or you've never worked out and you're trying to figure things out, lead with intent. And that intent could be getting 10,000 steps every single day this week.
Mm-hmm.
That could be hitting your protein goal and your fiber goal. That could be getting to bed on the same time every day. Like, I think that's the really big takeaway to anyone is everyone's intentional living looks different in every single season of life.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't mean that's always going to be how you're choosing to live intentionally. It's going to continue to adapt and evolve as we grow as people.
Yeah, it's true.
It's been an honor and a pleasure. Thank you for coming.
Thank you so much.